Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow morning and something feels wrong. Not I forgot to pay the electricity bill wrong. Not my ex liked my Instagram story wrong. I mean cosmically wrong, like your entire identity slipped out of your chest while you were sleeping. You grab your phone and your hand doesn't feel steady. Your heartbeat isn't driving with that usual engine idle thump. Your posture softens, like an invisible weight got lifted but somehow replaced with uncertainty. You speak, and your voice doesn't hit the room the way it used to. It's lighter, almost hesitant, and then you realize you don't feel competitive. You don't feel protective. You don't feel the instinct to move forward, to conquer, to build, to risk, to grind, to win. You feel neutral. Across the street, a construction worker puts down his drill, staring at it like it was just delivered from an alien spaceship. A firefighter sits on the curb of the road, helmet off, staring blankly at a burning trash bin, analyzing it like it's a philosophical puzzle instead of something to extinguish. A father hears the cry of his newborn and pauses, not out of neglect, but because the instinct to immediately protect isn't firing at full power anymore. And then you see it spreading like an emotional blackout rippling across the planet. Men everywhere, from CEOs in glass skyscrapers to farmers in the countryside, athletes in training camps, soldiers in bases, and truck drivers on the highway, all frozen in the same eerie, unsettling confusion. The primal spark that has driven human males for millions of years has vanished. This is not a social change, not politics, not a trend, not a cultural shift. This is biological, psychological, evolutionary, universal, immediate, a literal disappearance of the inner force humans have labeled for millennia as masculinity. Today, on If Zone, we're going to explore a scenario so bizarre, so scientifically chilling, so psychologically disruptive, that if it ever truly happened, civilization might not collapse, but it would twist into something unrecognizable. Ravender, welcome to What If Masculinity Disappeared Overnight? Let's dive in if you're not too soft to handle it. Masculinity is not one thing. It's not a beard. It's not gym PRs. It's not deep voices or football Sundays. Masculinity in scientific terms is a biological cocktail, a social construct, an adaptive strategy, and a mental framework all woven together over millions of years. At the core is testosterone, the hormone responsible for assertiveness, drive, competitiveness, muscle density, risk-taking, dominance, libido, and even the subtle subconscious urge to provide, build, and protect. When you remove masculinity, what you're really doing is stripping away both the biological and psychological software designed for survival. So what exactly changes when this vanishes overnight? He knows. First, motivation collapses. Not depression, not sadness, more like an existential emptiness. Men wake up and feel as if the internal pressure pushing them forward, the one that whispers, go, try, build, fight, stand up, take responsibility, is suddenly muted. It's like the inner engine lost its spark plug. Gyms go silent. Pre-workout cans remain untouched. Weights gather dust not because men don't want to lift them, but because the urge that once compelled them to chase progress simply isn't there. Sporting competitions? Canceled. Nobody feels that ancient hunger to outcompete, to dominate a scoreboard, to test themselves against others. Now, let's talk relationships. Brace yourself. When masculinity disappears, an invisible emotional glue dissolves. The instinct to pursue, to impress, to compete for a partner, to protect a partner, to commit, to build a future, all become foggy and abstract. Men who once flirted, approached, risked embarrassment, or rallied confidence now feel like they're walking through emotional water. Not in a bad mood, simply in a softened state. Romantic pursuit becomes less of a fire and more of a polite shrug. Meanwhile, women around the world wake up confused, shocked, even frightened. Not because they need masculinity to survive, but because the predictable polarity of human psychology has suddenly broken. Relationships depend on balance, not stereotypes, but underlying instincts. When that balance collapses, it triggers a subtle global confusion. Conversations feel hollow. Energy feels mismatched. And then something even stranger happens. Crime rates drop. Not a little, they plummet. Violent crime becomes almost non-existent. Bar fights evaporate. Road rage disappears like it never existed. The darker edges of masculinity, aggression, dominance displays, competitive violence evaporate along with the positives. For a moment, the world feels peaceful. But that peace is deceptive. Because while masculinity can be dangerous when corrupted, it's also the cornerstone of risk-taking, the biological reason humans build bridges, explore the unknown, engineer the impossible, and push beyond the limits of fear. Without masculinity, cities become quieter, yes, but innovation stalls. It doesn't crash immediately. Older inventions, systems, and structures still function, but humanity's forward momentum slows like a car coasting without fuel. Hospitals notice something alarming. Male reaction times decrease, but so does stress tolerance. Hard decisions become harder to make. Emergency responses suffer. Male firefighters hesitate to enter buildings. Male soldiers feel uncomfortable with confrontation. Male surgeons lose that razor-sharp certainty during critical moments. Masculinity isn't just about strength, it's about the cognitive ability to act decisively in chaos. The world feels peaceful, but it also feels disarmed, mentally, physically, and culturally. Now let's turn the lens to biology. If masculinity disappears overnight, testosterone doesn't drop to zero. That would be fatal. Instead, imagine testosterone becoming inert, like a radio frequency scrambled. The hormone circulates, but the receptors stop responding. Suddenly, everything from muscle density to metabolism to confidence gets recalibrated. Men lose physical strength faster than they realize. Their posture softens, their gait slows, the instinct to instinctively shield, fight, or take charge during danger becomes cloudy. Even vocal tone shifts, not dramatically, but subtly, like the emotional subwoofers were unplugged. But the strangest effect? Risk perception changes. Masculinity is closely tied to the neurological wiring that lets humans evaluate danger, overcome fear, and tolerate adversity. When masculinity disappears, fear itself changes flavor. It becomes sharper, more immediate, more intrusive. Without the masculine buffer, danger feels more intimidating. Even loud noises feel more startling, more intrusive. Humans evolved for millions of years with a masculine and feminine polarity, not as a hierarchy but as a survival system. Masculinity handled danger. Femininity handled resilience and emotional memory. Remove one and the other becomes overloaded, not because women are incapable, but because the entire species' emotional architecture destabilizes. Now let's step deeper psychologically, spiritually, historically. For thousands of years, masculinity has been tied to archetypes across cultures: warriors, guardians, builders, kings, wanderers, hunters. Even the Bible references masculinity not as brute force, but as responsibility, courage, stewardship, and self-control. When masculinity disappears, those archetypes vanish too. The myths, symbols, and cultural anchors that shape societies become hollow. Ancient philosophers warned us not about men becoming weak, but about men losing purpose. When the inner compass dissolves, humans drift. Without masculinity, that drift becomes a global emotional fog. But now comes the twist. Without masculinity, something unexpected begins to grow. Compassion rises. Empathy increases. Communication becomes more open. Men who once buried emotions now experience them with clarity. Some relationships actually improve as emotional barriers melt. Creativity blossoms in unexpected ways. Men who once chased achievement for validation now explore expression for its own sake. Humanity shifts from a progress-driven species to a reflection-driven species. But here's the paradox. Without the masculine drive to build, protect, innovate, and challenge limits, society becomes stable, but static, safe, but stagnant, connected, but unmotivated. Humanity isn't in danger of collapsing, but it's in danger of stagnating. We survive, but we don't ascend. Human progress has always required a balance, the harmony between masculine drive and feminine wisdom. Remove one and the song becomes incomplete. And that's when it hits. A deeper question. Was masculinity ever the problem? Or was the imbalance the real issue? Instead of a world without masculinity, what the world needed was masculinity in its mature form, not toxic, not suppressed, not exaggerated, but grounded, purposeful, disciplined, courageous, protective, patient, principled. The kind of masculinity that doesn't dominate but leads with responsibility. Suddenly, the world realizes what it lost. Masculinity wasn't just muscles and ego. It was the evolutionary engine behind risk, protection, invention, architecture, exploration, and even sacrifice. Now imagine if masculinity returned not in its extremes, but refined. A version upgraded by the lessons of this strange global reset. Men rediscover their drive. Women rediscover the polarity. Society regains momentum. The world grows safer not because masculinity vanished, but because men learn how to wield it with wisdom instead of impulse. Maybe masculinity wasn't flawed. Maybe humanity just never learned how to use it properly. Own them. And maybe, just maybe, the real fear isn't losing masculinity. The real fear is never understanding it. If you enjoyed this mind-bending scenario and want more deep, cinematic what-if explorations, hit that like button, subscribe to If Zone, and comment below what reality-breaking question you want me to unravel next. Your next thought experiment begins the moment you choose it.